Welcome to Complex Creatures, exploring spirituality and the common good. Welcome to Complex Creatures, where we discuss spirituality as tools for the common good. I am not your host. I'm Alan Barnes. I usually do the technical chores on the podcast, but today I wanted to actually interview Jarrod about a handful of things and basically have a bigger conversation about creativity. Jarrod's been working on some writing lately, and if you're a regular listener to the show, you probably know that I am involved in all kinds of various creative activities often. And I suggested to Jarrod that we should have a conversation about creativity as a spiritual tool itself. You know, I wrote this paragraph. I wrote, creativity isn't just artistic expression. It's a spiritual posture rooted in the image of a creative God. The act of creating, whether in words, images, music, ideas, or relationships, becomes a way of participating in divine life. This conversation explores how creativity shapes our souls, expands our empathy, and trains us to perceive mystery, beauty, and truth. So, my first question for you, Jarrod.
Yes.
Is tell me a little bit about what you've been writing lately.
Thank you, Alan. Well, I have to say that in 2018, I was doing a lot of research about Mr. Rogers, and this was prior to the documentary coming out about him. But I watched Mr. Rogers growing up when I was a kid, and I was in the process of trying to do some vision casting at work, and I was really inspired by a lot of material that was coming out in advance of the documentary about Fred Rogers.
Okay.
I developed so much of it that the person who worked in our communications department looked at me and says, "You should write a book about Mr. Rogers. Like, you know a lot."
Okay.
All right. And so I said, okay. I mean, I just finished my PhD in theology. I did not want to be, quote unquote, the scholar of Mr. Rogers. I didn't know what that would look like. I didn't know how to talk about the theology of Fred Rogers unless you watched every one of his episodes. But I started thinking about the fact that Mr. Rogers was this public communicator, and he was also an ordained clergy person.
Okay.
And in his ordination for the Presbyterian Church, his show was his ministry, and he communicated a tremendous amount of values. And I thought, man, given the age that we live in, I think that there's a lot of instruction that a person who communicates the sacred of any type, whether they're preaching or teaching, leading a retreat, a spiritual director, a writer, an artist, whatever, they can really learn a lot from Mr. Rogers about our moment. And so I developed these three categories to think about. Our age is an age of anxiety. Our age is an age of the algorithm and automation. And our age is an age of authenticity. So I thought, well, what can we learn about how Fred Rogers acted and behaved and communicated that we can apply as people who try to communicate sacred ideas? And I began working on that. And then COVID hit, and I remember, it's not something you can work tons on when you have full-time work and stuff. So I had a nice bulk of material and research. COVID hit, and my first thought when COVID hit was, oh boy, I'm going to get a few weeks out of the office. I'll finish this thing off. And I had a hard time writing. I had a hard time thinking. I languished. I struggled like most.
Sure.
And over time, I just had this material, and I really started. This is a long way of saying that I really didn't know what to do with it. It wasn't enough for a whole book, but I didn't really want to go further with it. And over the past couple of years, I've been doing a tremendous amount of research and thinking about what does it mean for us to communicate the sacred in an age of disenchantment. What does it mean? And how do you communicate religious ideas in an era where we talk about increasing secularity? And I've been journaling and thinking and writing. And so I thought, well, why not just try to write a series of essays, a book of essays about that? 3 of the chapters could be using Fred Rogers in those ways I mentioned.
Sure.
So lately, I've been rising at 4 in the morning every day, even Saturdays and Sundays, and
Mhm.
doing some writing. And
Okay.
so I've taken my Rogers material, but I've written on what the purpose of a piece of religious communication is. I've written on the manosphere and the
Mm.
rise in masculinity issues. I've written a little bit about why Stoicism is becoming so popular
Mm.
in the world right now, and it has been for a
Mhm.
little while. I've written on how do we communicate the sacred to a community of people who are losing their memory and cognitive decline, and how does the community of faith or the church, how do we think about holding memory of people? So there's these different areas. Thought about enchantment and different things. So that's long answer, but that's what I've been working on as of late.
So, do you think that would you qualify what you've been working on writing wise as a spiritual practice?
Yes, I think so. And I think it's because the habit that I've taken is, like I say, rising at 4 in the morning, and I'm by myself. And sometimes that writing is less glamorous. Sometimes, like this morning,
Mhm.
it was writing I had done before, and I printed it out, and I was just rereading it with a pen, and I'm now changing things, or I'm writing in notes, and so it's more editing minded. But sometimes, it's highly creative, and I don't have material in front of me, and I'm just writing from my mind and my heart, knowing I'll go back and I'll interact with texts and ideas later.
Mhm.
That sometimes feels very spiritual because it's so generative that you can get caught up in that flow sense, and
Sure.
it almost can feel like it can almost feel like you're tapping into some greater creative presence. But I would say the way that that might be strange and esoteric and maybe just like serendipitous when it happens. I would say that more often than not, the aspect of sitting down, collecting thoughts, and trying to organize them is inherently becomes spiritual for me because then it helps me to be a better reflector of things and a better at being aware. It
Yes.
increasing my awareness of my own experience, ideas, how I see connections, and I'm reflecting. So that awareness is the
Hmm.
spiritual practice that and sometimes conversations, and hopefully they're not boring to people. Sometimes my conversations will say, "Well, I was writing about this morning,
Hmm.
and I realized that it has a lot to do with something we're talking about, and so my ideas are getting more clear,
Sure.
or I'm seeing how they touch to other ideas, and it's making me look at my world. I think with more patience, frankly, just to see it.
You touched on something there that I think is actually really important to all kinds of creativity, whether it's writing or drawing or playing music or playing sports or getting things done at the office, which is the flow state. I think that the flow state is super important for productivity and for getting in the uh, tapping into whatever that thing is that you're trying to describe right now.
Hmm.
And and I also think that it's something that a lot of people have a difficult time accessing. When did you first become aware of the flow state? And did you read any books that helped you get there, or did you just find that it happened for you naturally as a result of what you were writing?
Well, I think I've heard over the years about flow state from psychologists, and I think I first probably heard about it in the world of sports,
Mm.
athletes getting into that state.
In our game of tennis.
Yeah, well, I think it's often been applied to Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
You sort of just go off, and
Hmm.
everything's just falling, right? And I guess I've read a bit here and there about it. I've got a therapist myself I've talked to about it. And I think the best sense that I can make of it is that because I think sometimes we can get a little bit special and precious about it and act like
Mm.
Yeah. I don't know. Sometimes I think we can overthink it. And what I noticed was whenever I am not at my best in a given situation, whether I'm speaking publicly or teaching in a meeting or anywhere, I mean, goodness sakes, in a physical way, it's that
Yeah.
I'm too in my head. I'm analyzing what I'm doing. I'm being self-critical. I'm editing as I go. It's that executive function almost kind of like dialed up.
Hmm.
And I find it best to just get into my body. And I think when I
Sure.
started, I know that when I speak, and when I preach a sermon or I speak in trying to inspire, I can get into a state of flow naturally. I mean, I can do that like performatively. It's something that comes to me.
Hmm.
Um, and when I was younger, I found out that I don't do so well when I manuscript everything out and I have to read it because sometimes looking down I get lost. That can take me
Sure.
out of flow state kind of thing. So for me,
Right.
it's better to embody the material and have it inside of me and come out of me performatively. It's not
Sure.
memorized, but that's the way I describe it. But during COVID, I found myself preaching to a camera and about 10 people, maybe max, in the sanctuary,
Sure.
and I started having panic attacks. And the panic attacks were just the pressure from the pressure and the anxiety and the worry of everything and
Hmm.
the projecting. I would, like a lot of people, I make up stories about other people, like not like gossipy stories, but like assuming that people are saying things about me or assuming people are mad
Right.
at me or I'm making things up. And I would feel this panic attack, which feels like a hyperventilation and like a heart attack and like all these different things. And I realized that through some work that what I could do is I learned to work through them, but I also learned how to avoid having them, and all of it had to do with getting into my body, getting
I
into the
see.
to the present moment. So to be like awake to the now, that sounds so new agey, but like so to this day, I walk around a lot listening to music that will get me out of my head and into my body, and I'll dance if I want to dance. I have a lot of somatic
Hmm.
bodily experiences. I'll lift my hands. I will breathe. I will do breathing exercises. I will get loose. I will be dialed into this thing. Because when I'm at my best, I know I'm standing there and I don't have to worry, even if I forget what I'm going to say, because I'm
Sure.
so present in that moment that I can even use that
Right.
forgetfulness, or that forgetfulness will be a gift to me. And so it gives me a sense of confidence and courage that if I will come against this, I will find a way through it, or I will even hold it and embrace it. And
Hmm.
so that's when I can be in more of a flow state. It's when I get out of the critical mind. And I'll be honest, Alan, you're a creative guy. I bet you're pretty critical of yourself.
Oh yeah, very much.
I am the worst writer. I mean, I'm terrible at it. I mean, I have been. No one has ever said to me, "Boy, you write so beautifully. Your prose is wonderful. Your grasp of grammar rules is wonderful." No, they're not. It's not, and I'm terrible. And I read my stuff, and I just want to quit. But
Mm.
every piece of advice is, write, crummy. They use other words, first drafts, right? Like that,
That's right.
just
That's
write.
right.
You just got to write. And so I nod my head at that advice and I ignore it most of my life. And now I'm just trying to accept it and write and just put it out there.
My experience, and I do a lot of different kinds of creative things. I do some writing. I do I play a lot of music, and I do a lot of 2D visual artwork. My experience has always been that everything that I do is absolutely god awful terrible.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I mean,
And
I also don't I also pretty critical of my sermons. Like
yeah,
like
sure.
I'm defensive if you want to attack it, but I'll tell you it's the worst thing ever.
Yeah. Well, what ends up happening with me is I can tell you exactly how bad everything is. And in fact, most of the time when I finish a big project, I never want to see, hear of it again.
Yeah.
But now's the time when you finish the big project is when you have to like go start trying to sell it.
Yeah.
And that is really tough for me, man, because most of the time when I get to the end of a big project, I have sort of I've given up on the idea that I can make it better.
Yeah. I've often thought that the filmmakers must be very frustrated on press junkets.
Sure.
Um,
Sure.
Probably bored of it. And I gave this advice to a lay person this week. I'm actually
Mm-hmm.
gonna. I'm working with an elder in my congregation to preach a sermon. I mean, they've got incredible communication skills,
Sure.
and so I already know that the leap's not going to be hard. But it's a form of discipleship training. I think everyone should be able to present the sacred message of their faith. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to be a vocational minister. So like this is why I'm doing it, right? And I said by the time you say this on a Sunday,
Mm-hmm.
like if the week has gone well for me, I am
Mm-hmm.
already really tired of the material. I am over. Like saying it out loud to myself makes me feel pain. Like I'm like, ugh,
Yeah, right.
because you've been through it so much.
Sure. Sure. I'm right there with you, man. Okay, so one of the questions that I wrote down for this conversation was the spiritual life often begins with listening. What role does listening play in your writing process? I want to expand that just a smidgen into the context of what we're talking about right now by saying, do you feel like when you are in the moment and having to speak or write, what role does listening play in those moments? You're in your flow state, you're trying to make the thing happen. What or who are you listening to?
Well, I think okay, so for writing, the listening is something I don't do simultaneously.
Right.
For me, like if I'm in flow state writing, I am just cranking out material, and I know that it doesn't. The ideas may be in there, but the
Mm-hmm.
form may not be beautiful, and that the listening is going to come later, or when I sit
Mm-hmm.
there and I look and I read and I say it out loud, and I that sort of thing. When I'm preaching, and for those of you who I don't know if people who listen to this don't believe in a God or preaching as a habit. It may
Sure.
be strange to them, but like I stop, man. I pause. I take a breath. I ask people to breathe with me. I ask people to
Mm-hmm.
make room. I make a confession because to me this is an incredibly sacred moment. Mr. Rogers, Fred Rogers, going back to him,
Mm-hmm.
every
Yeah.
time he spoke, he bowed to his audience, which is now, I took that since 2018. I bow in the pulpit. I bow a little bit and I say, it's a delight to be with you. And why he did it was because he was acknowledging the sacred in him, was acknowledging the sacred in the other. So these
Mm-hmm.
moments of like, I'm going to stop and I'm going to pause and I'm going to be present. And I'm opening myself up to hear from God in those moments, though I have prepared.
Right.
We hope that we've heard from God in the preparation, but I leave it open enough to move, in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, when I'm preparing a sermon, I've been known, man, to go like to have lunch at this little tavern, bar, grill. My neighbor used to own it, and it was only like a mile from the church. And I would go have lunch. I'd
Mm-hmm.
sit there with my journal open, and he would chat me up. But I would listen to conversations. And
Sure.
that's the funniest thing. Like, I make jokes about it in the pulpit. Be careful. I mean, because I'll be like, I overheard a couple at the restaurant the other night. Be careful, a preacher may be around, right? Like, I make that
Yeah, yeah,
joke,
right. Sure.
but like, I listen very, intently. And I took my kids to one of those trampoline ball pit indoor playgrounds once, and I was
Sure.
the only adult not on my cell phone. I prided myself on that because I think that like we miss out on so many interesting
Yeah.
things to observe in life, right? So I try
Sure.
to listen,
Mm-hmm.
and I find myself just like noting stuff. Like there's a guy recently. He was in my study, and he was and I know the person and I know their story really really well, and I've told their story so often. But they were sitting in my office and made an offhanded comment about their particular story, and it stuck with me. They said it in a way. They said something about their story that I've shared that in a way I've never thought of it, and
Mm-hmm.
perhaps I should have thought of it this way. So I just jotted a line down because it just
Sure.
made me think differently.
Mm.
And I find like those things are like these gifts and nuggets. I
Sure.
mean, when we talk about original ideas, like that especially when you're doing
Mm-hmm.
academic work, right? This is an original contribution. To do a truly original idea, some people say, they quote the philosophers, right? There's nothing is new under the sun, or they quote the
Right.
scriptures and these kinds of things. Well, what is originality? I think there's tremendous amount of research done that says that so much of creativity or originality is from synthesizing ideas.
Right.
Music is never, I mean, music is always taking cues from this tradition and that tradition, this style and that style, putting things together.
Right.
And so to be creative is to attend to the expression of others, to listen to the traditions, the stories, to take from, and to add on to, subtract from, bring
Right.
together, think from a different angle.
Hmm.
So in every way I can imagine, being aware is part of that.
Hmm. No, I'm in complete agreement. One of the biggest challenges I have teaching creativity uh, at the university level is that so many quote unquote well-meaning adults have told these kids that they have to be original all the time, and
Mm,
they don't have a concept of what that means.
yeah,
And so a big part of what I do in the freshman year is just try to get them into the idea that they're going to have to show their influences. You
yeah.
know, I'm trying to think of a good example. The example that I usually tell people about as a like a starting point at the university is Star Wars. Not because I'm a huge Star Wars fan, but rather because I think it's something that they probably all are aware of. You
Mm-hmm.
know, and George Lucas made Star Wars because he couldn't get the rights to Flash Gordon, and uh, and
Good
so
for
he made
him.
his yeah, and so he made his own version, and in order to make his own version, he didn't want people to like recognize the Flash Gordonness of it, so he dumped a bunch of other things in his stew of Star Wars. And it's a really remarkable and wide-ranging set of things that he added to it. But like you can actually run around and point to all of his interests and
Right.
show how they landed in Star Wars. And that's one of the big things that I'm trying to convince students of is this idea that it's exactly what you just said. It's that merging of ideas that makes them original, as opposed to them having to come up with something completely unique out of whole cloth.
Yeah, there's this Japanese tradition. I'm gonna say it. My Japanese pronunciations are terrible, but it's shuhari, and
Okay.
shuhar and shuha and ri. I think they all correspond to these different words. Like I'm going to mangle it all, but basically it is like you receive the tradition, and then you break the tradition, and then you go beyond the tradition. So it's a learning principle.
Hmm.
Like so in jujitsu, for instance, you'll hear the
Yeah.
instructors and professors say, here's what I want you to do. And then they're like, okay, master that. Now, but when you master that and you get good, you can do this. Right?
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
like you can go beyond it, but this is the basic, learn that, and then you can and then that's where creativity comes in. People talk about how can you be creative with like a thing like a physical athletic, but
Hmm.
you can,
You can.
but you got to master the basic first. Or
Right.
when I'm telling a guy, here's how I want you to preach or teach give a lesson. Like here
Hmm.
is a hard like out master it, and so much of creativity is that. I think about how boring so much of like reading theology and philosophy can be.
Hmm.
It's often very technical and very, it's very insider ball game focused, and I get that. But I'm always
Sure.
delighted when I read somebody who decides, hey, they're going to start talking about jazz when they're talking
Hmm.
about race theory and theology,
Mm.
or they're going to talk about, there's this book called 3 Mile an Hour God by Kosuke Koyama, this Japanese theologian,
Okay.
and it's a series of essays and 3 Mile an Hour God. So the average human being walks at 3 miles an hour. God identifies with humanity in Jesus. God takes on humanity. God moves at our pace, 3 miles an hour. God is with us, right? This is the
Hmm.
beautiful title of the book. Like
Hmm.
each essay is like 3 pages. And it's
Hmm.
like punchy thought and idea, different
Hmm.
than these long academic treatises. And it's like a cool cup of water to read it, right? And so I'm always fascinated by people who can take these lessons and insights and show them by pairing them with fields of thinking, or that no one connects, because we get ghettoized in our own worlds, so but that's enormously creative. It takes creative abilities to do that.
Totally agreed. Totally agreed. Okay, so I am of the opinion that one of the big things art is trying to do is ask questions.
Okay.
And I have the vague sense that one of the big things religion is trying to do is answer questions.
Okay.
And I have a general theory that one of the reasons that art and religion have a tendency to be in conflict with one another is because of this idea that art is trying to ask questions and religion is trying to answer questions. When you're writing,
Yeah.
are you asking questions? Are you answering questions? Are you react to that for me in your own writing? How do you feel this push and pull or tug of war in terms of communication?
I think I'm out of my depth with you on this. I'm not very good at aesthetics and philosophy and theology. It's not my area. I'm not sure if that's
Sure.
what I'm not sure I agree that's what art does, or that's all that art does.
Okay.
But let me just take you at your premise, and your ideas. I mean, I think art certainly does ask questions.
Sure.
I'm not sure though that I think religion is all about answering questions. And I think that's what we tend to think.
Okay, good.
So in the essay that I'm working on, what is the purpose of a piece of religious communication?
Okay.
Um, I don't think the answer. By the way, any answers and thoughts I'm offering, the one reason why I'm like questioning whether I'm doing this is I'm just not sure how original they are. Like I have that
Sure.
question all the
Sure.
time. Like,
Right.
well, I can tell you about this being said elsewhere. All I can hope to do is make a contribution to the conversation. And
Of course.
when I look at the typical forms of religious communication that I see in the world, mostly I see sermons, right? Mostly I see
Hmm.
some sort of uh, verbal speech about the sacred. And we
Hmm.
can break that outside of the Christian tradition and put it in other forms of
Sure.
other traditions. What I see done most often is focused on basically on teaching material and information.
Hmm.
Information transaction, right? Like information
Hmm.
acquisition, give you data and input.
Hmm.
Um, Let me give you a bit of dogma. Let me make you feel interested by telling you about biblical history and language,
Sure. Great.
right? But I'm going to pass on this information. Um, Now, most people will say there should be a so what, like there's a purpose to it, right? So a
Okay.
lot of the information is to get me to go do something, right?
Okay.
And then I sort of feel like a lot of what we're told we need to go do, we already know
Hmm.
we need to go do it, right? Like it's not new. And now there's a place for that, I think. I think we need
Sure.
moral and ethical reminders all the time. But I'm inspired by the idea that the primary like reason for religious speech is to not so much to deliver just information, but to transform you, to
Okay. I like that.
to change you.
Hmm.
So Bruno Latour, this French philosopher who's recently passed, he wrote this book called The Torments of Religious Speech. He says that,
Mm.
like, look at the angels in the scriptures, like they're messengers. Angelos in Greek means messenger. Very little of what they share is actually new information. Very little of it. It's not so much like to give you information for you as the container. It's meant to change the dagon container.
Right.
Like,
Right.
and so I think art actually does something very similar. I think
Hmm.
art and religion might in some way be lockstep in that they're supposed to provide some sort of experience.
Yes.
And I don't think asking questions and answering questions are mutually opposed either. Like,
Oh, I don't think so either. But I will say that I think that when I say that, I guess what I'm trying to say is I think that there are some religious traditions where and some religious leaders where they think that that's their role, and so it's become
right.
problematic as a result of them thinking that they need to answer questions. And I also think that it's similar in art in that if all art can do is ask questions or whatever, we start getting into that situation where, well, is there no craft to art? If art's only supposed to be asking questions that have never been asked before or whatever, it starts becoming this intellectual navel gazing problem. You know, so to be clear, I'm not saying that either one of them have to be that exact thing. What I guess I'm saying is I think that might be the cliche of how they're looked at.
Let me tell you, I just want to reflect on that piece of writing I'm doing on like the purpose of religious communication. Because what I am playing off Bruno Latour and this theologian named Ted Smith, but then I'm saying, like, in thinking about how a piece of religious communication should be about a transformation. It should be about an experience. My big thing is I'm asking for people to think about religious communication being artful, right?
Okay.
And so I give an example of, and I talk about how, in my experience, there are films and songs where I just tell people this is a sermon, and they always look at me funny. But like I'll give you an example, and it's one I write about. It's from the singer-songwriter I really adore called Sufjan Stevens, and he wrote an album called "Come On and Feel the Illinois," or no, it's just Illinois, I guess. But it's a whole album about their songs are based on towns and things in Illinois. And there's this one song called John Wayne Gacy about the serial killer. And as you're listening to the song, it's lullaby-like, it's sweet, his singing in falsetto. And the first line in the song, I believe, is his father was a drinker. And immediately, because all you know is the title, immediately you have, I believe, at least me, my experience, is a bit of compassion begins to grow in my heart.
Sure.
Father was a drinker. And his mom cried at night in bed. And then you start feeling the despair of this young boy. But you know who he is, and you know what's going to happen, right? And you're identifying. The song is leading you to identify or experience something of this boy's terrible life, right? And then it starts to say things like, he was interested in these these boys, right? And it says he dressed up like a clown for them. You know the story. You know that he used a clown to lure people. It's monstrous. Right. But the way that Sufjan stings it, it's so sweet. It's like an offering. It's like a gift. And you're going with him. It's inductive. It's not presuming you know the end of the story, even though you do. So you're with him in this journey, and you ask yourself, I mean, like, this is a beautiful song, and I like it, but should I like this song? Like, it makes you feel that. It made me feel that way, right?
Sure.
And when it describes what he does, it does it very fast. It does it opaquely, so it's not gruesome. And it ends with this, like, and I say it's like a firework exploding in the air. It's a, oh my God. And it just kind of falls.
Right.
And you've been there quick. You weren't forced to look too long. And you're asking yourself, this song I'm loving this. What is this song? What could this song be about? And then at the end of the song, at the very, very end, Sufjan Stevens says, look beneath the floorboards, right? Like that's where the boys were in John Wayne Gacy's crawl space.
Right.
But then he says, like, and in my best behavior, I am really just like him. Look beneath the floorboards and see what I have hid. And it's done.
Right.
And I believe that you could leave that song in disgust. Or like me, when you heard it, you were trembling. When you first heard it, you were trembling because here's the thing, Sufjan Stevens is saying, we're all capable of vile, wicked evil.
Sure.
The song, I mean, hey, rightfully so, judge and condemn these actions, right? I don't want to look at this, right? Yet, I mean, I could just tell you, Alan, I could sit down. Let's go have a cup of coffee and let me tell you that murder is wrong. But let me also remind you that like good people are capable of heinous vile acts. You're not above it. You hide stuff too, by the way. You should probably be more mindful about the things that you hide. They could grow.
Right.
You could talk about how hurt people. I could tell you, Alan, your actions, they really hurt your kid if you're going to
Mm-hmm.
treat them this way. I mean, I could tell you all these things, and you could sit there and sip your coffee and go, nod your head. You could tell me, yes, I know that. You'd probably be polite with me about it. But
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if I would change you from telling you that you're capable of evil too. Would that change you? Or would it just be like, yeah, sure, I got it. But I could lead you also through this musical experience,
Sure.
make you feel something, and then make you go to a very basic moral insight and go, oh, and you
Right.
might even be forced to confront your own hidden secrets, which for someone like you and me isn't a bunch of, murdered bodies, but it might be that we lied.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I say that because, and then I go, that song's a sermon because
Yep.
it gave me this experience that transforms me. So for me, there's a real close connection between being artful in this world, like in communicating the religious,
Sure.
and art.
Sure.
Is that in that it can give you an emotive experience as much as it can give you an intellectual insight or stimulation.
Sure. Sure.
So I do try to
Interesting.
preach that way, and I think a lot of people miss it. I think a lot of people miss it sometimes because I think there's these. I think I'm playing a longer game than sometimes. I think people are like, wow, like I wish that we would just get these kind of biblical facts.
Right. Right.
Tell me more about the Bible. The whole time I can wax on the Bible, but I'm trying to put the listener into the perspective. I'm trying to put the listener inside of the world of the text,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
as well as the purpose of the text,
Mm-hmm.
or our purpose of the text, and let it work in them so that, like, my goal is not that they can come back next week and tell me the three truths about justification by faith or something like that,
Right.
but it is that it's moved them somewhere.
Sure. I think that when I read the Bible and I look at the way that Jesus communicated mostly through parables, I find those stories to be similar to what you're describing right now. He's trying to get his audience to associate with some event or thought or feeling, and then get them to come to their own conclusion about what the right action is as a result of this situation. Are you ever using parables as a model for your writing or any of those kinds of
I wish
ideas?
I wish that I were a better like parable writer. I tried my hand at it once. I was in a class on the philosophy of Soren Kierkegaard, or say
Mm,
Kierkegaard. And one of the things about him is that he used the method of communicating just simply called indirect communication. And I talk about him a lot. His method is as influential to me as his philosophy. Um, in his world, in 19th century, Copenhagen, Denmark, everybody by virtue of their birth certificate was also a Lutheran Christian. Yet,
sure.
clearly looking at society, not everyone was a Christian or adhered to Christianity. And reading the philosophy of, Hegel and people who were influenced by Hegel and all these other like continental thinkers, clearly not everyone is playing with Christian thought alone, right? So,
Hmm.
how do you then proclaim the Christian message to people who already know it well?
Right.
This is why I always say Christmas Eve and Easter are my two most challenging sermons a year, because you get the people who show up, but they know those two stories. So how do you make it hit them in a way with a deeper truth, a different truth, or a shade on the truth
Sure.
that's unique for them to even pay attention, let alone have it affect
Sure.
them? And so he tried indirect communication. So he would write. I mean, he had pseudonyms, which were
Hmm.
ironic and funny. His titles of his texts were ironic and funny. And
Hmm.
and he might go on for 100 pages on some point of view that he, as a man, disagreed with completely, but he would be arguing
Sure.
for it,
Right.
trying to make you, as the reader, disgusted.
Yes,
And
yes.
ultimately you would be getting on his side. So in a way, in that class on Kierkegaard, one of the kind of like an assignment we could do is try our hand at writing parables because they work in a similar way. Tom Long, the great scholar of preaching, he says this a bunch, and I've heard him say it in person, and I've read it somewhere. He might be quoting John Dominic Crossan or some other New Testament scholar, suggesting that a parable is often, maybe better translated, the word might be riddle. There's sort of these little
Yeah, right.
riddles, right? They're not,
Sure.
when people say they're just like these like everyday stories that have like extraordinary meaning or grace meaning. I think
Hmm.
that's too shallow. I think they
Sure.
are riddle. They're brain teasers. They're meant to they do a work in you to try to understand them. Like they're
Right.
not always so simple, and that's also the point.
Hmm.
So I think they're really valuable. I always wanted to. I'm a storyteller, but I always wanted to be that kind of guy who like gets asked a question, instead of giving you a direct answer, gives you a story first, like right
Sure.
off the cuff, right? Because they
Right.
have a way of conveying truth, like in a more impactful way than just propositional truth statements.
Sure. Sure. Sure.
We are
Sure.
storied beings. That's how we understand the world.
You know, I was listening to an interview. It was like a live Zoom kind of interview with a writer that I really like, a guy named Brian Michael Bendis. Somebody asked him. He's a comic book writer, by the way, and one of the people on the call basically asked him. He's trying to write this comic book where he's going to basically tell the story through some metaphorical lens of a situation that this person had been in, where his girlfriend had done this terrible thing to him, and he wanted to write it down as a story, and and Bendis says, probably the most interesting way to tell that one would be to tell it from the perspective of the girlfriend, as opposed to your perspective. And what I took from that was this idea that exactly what you're talking about with Kierkegaard is this idea of using writing as a way to think about the perspective of the other.
Yeah.
And my question for you right now is, we have a lot of polarized thinking going on in our society.
Yeah.
Have you ever written anything where you're trying to take on the attitude of someone who has a completely other, political or sociological perspective than yourself? Or have you ever recommended that to anybody who's having a difficult time getting along with people in the congregation? I mean, how might we use this idea of thinking about the other in writing as a spiritual tool?
No, I haven't, but that's a great practice that maybe we should do. I will tell you something that I did. Um,
Okay.
there is this place called the Collegeville Institute, which is associated with
Hmm.
St. John's College up in Minnesota, which is
Hmm.
like Catholic school. It's got a monastery, and when you go to the institute, there's these writing workshops, and it's really a great deal. I mean, like if the person leading the workshop is interesting to you, talking about what you're interested in, and you apply, they like, room and board for free while you're there. You pray with the monks. It's a beautiful land. You get these writing workshops. I went up once, and the speaker was talking about creative writing for spirituality, and
Hmm.
we did this exercise that was really interesting. And I've done this before, but I would like to just do it like more regularly for myself and possibly lead people on it in a retreat setting. But she said, take this like construction paper and like just write a rant about something that
Mm.
you that you believe in
Sure.
and just rant. And then after you just ranted, take this like, it's like a marker and go and just like don't mark through letters and words, but go between, right down the center of your paper, and just it looks like a zigzag. You're just cutting down the center, and then that'll be your guide for your scissors, and then literally cut the paper in half. Then you take a larger, like long, wide construction paper, and you tape it, the left half to the left, the right half to the right, right? And then you try to write down the middle of what you just wrote, right? So I ranted about, I don't know what, the last thing I ranted about was, it might have been people's attitudes about environmentalism or
Sure.
climate change, something like that.
Right.
And I mean, when you rant, you're not writing charitably, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're writing, and but you think you're right. You think you're correct in your assertion when you're ranting. And then
Sure.
it forced me to then like take a more measured or moderate approach in what I wrote next. I remember
Mm-hmm.
then taking on in a more faithful way the arguments of another side.
Sure.
Um, I still had the same like ultimate point of view,
Mm-hmm.
but it was more creative. It was more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It did, I would say it did create a sense of, empathy, or if that means understanding another point of view a little more greatly. I think that what you described may be an incredible um, practice that you could do it like on a retreat setting. I think that
Mm-hmm.
writing itself is not often utilized for spirituality outside of like really famously people talk about journaling. Um,
Sure.
are you a journaler?
I'm not, but I am a sketchbook person. So a lot of times I'll have like little notes about what I'm thinking or feeling in the margin, but mostly it's drawing.
Mm. I'm not a journaler either, but I've got all these. I mean, I have all these journals where you start and they're never finished.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and someone gave me a journal as a gift, and I was like, I was really, it was a gift, so I was committed to finishing it. And between that time and now, I got 10 more journals given to me, so I have all these journals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
But
right.
literally, I write some ideas here and there, a poem here or there, and mostly it's just sermon notes because
Mm-hmm.
I have a hard time filling it up, and I don't know if I'll ever return to it. But I think journaling can be great for people. However, I'm not sure that is robust enough. I think there are other writing exercises you can do or other ways of thinking about it than journaling. I think sometimes we think, oh, well, dear diary, or this is my journal. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to
Right.
have fluffy thoughts. Well, maybe that's not that doesn't connect with you. But
Mm-hmm.
maybe like me, if you can convince yourself to start writing about ideas and thoughts, it's not necessarily a journal, but all of a sudden you start exercising that muscle, and it might be meaningful to you in another way. So you could start jotting down ideas about any number of topics, and it
Sure.
can become more than it started out being.
Sure.
Yeah.
Totally. Totally agreed. All right. I'm actually going to close us,
Yeah.
but I will look forward to coming back to this topic, maybe from a different perspective at some future episode. But my question for you is this: what is the best piece of writing? So give me some sort of recommendation for a book or something that had any sort of impact on you in the last year.
About writing itself.
Well, any piece of writing that had an impact on you. It doesn't have to be about writing.
Well, I will say about writing itself, I do revisit Bird by Anne Lamott, which is like so it's so like often offered. It's
Yeah, sure.
cliche, but Anne Lamott's writing is generally memoir slash spirituality and theology, and it's so impactful, to me to read what she says and how she processes things.
Hmm.
Um, I have read a ton of stuff about stoicism and things of that nature, and that has not moved me in the way that I would say that. Oh, trying to think of one that's really moved. You know what? The one that's most moved me again is coming back to this Czech philosopher, theologian, priest named Tomas Halik, and
Okay,
his book Patience with God, the story of Zacchaeus continuing in us. And Zacchaeus is his metaphor for the seeker and the doubter in this world.
sure.
And one of the things about Halik is that he brings me to a state of reflection about belief and disbelief and faith and atheism and struggle and pain and patience and all this stuff in the world that I think is so meaningful for today. Yet
Mm,
he has the ability to write in a prose, an accessibility of a C.S. Lewis type or a Graham Greene,
mm,
even though
sure.
he is this deeply, rigorous academic, and that has moved me. And I'll also give a shout out to my new friend Jason Biasi, who's written this book, like Surprised by Jesus Again, and it is like reading the Bible with the church fathers and mothers, and so you get a lot of teaching about how the ancients would have interpreted texts or stuff. But he uses a journalistic approach to writing, and a lot of personality. So he's footnoting and citing and engaging the academic world, yet the clarity of it is so helpful. And for a person like me, sometimes I say, hey, the concepts we're playing with are so hard, we should really endeavor to make our writing not hard to understand as best we can. Boy, I was really inspired by that because, like I said, I don't really think much of my own writing. I think it's so hard. Writing is really, really hard.
It is.
Yet,
it is.
Maybe end with telling you that I am and have been appreciating and enjoying getting up at 4, starting off my day writing, even if it's
excellent.
A few sentences. And it kind of sets me off on a course in the day that I find much more fruitful.
Thanks, Jarrod.
All right. Take care.